at the old Soda Sopa ruins. Come on, what do the Coon friends really have to offer you?
You know, you do bring a good point. But anywho, back to the little side note that I was about to have like all of 5 seconds ago. I made a little YouTube short about what I thought was gonna happen with the top 5 picks of the NBA draft, and I never actually got to explain my thoughts. So even though it has nothing to do with this game,
That's what I
I
thought.
just wanted to briefly talk about it, and I'm probably gonna actually clip it and make it its own video probably. But so what I was thinking was for the NBA draft was the top 5 picks are going to be very interesting because this was a draft that a lot of people talked about not being very interesting as a whole. You know, I think like on the Draymond Green show, Draymond Green talked about it being a weaker draft class, which is what a lot of analysts have been talking about and whatnot. But as a whole, I think the draft actually could be relatively interesting this year. Looking at a lot of mock drafts having a lot of different routes of what teams could do and whatnot. And I just want to briefly talk about it. So before I continue with this mission, I am going to go on this little sidetrack note. So when I made my draft video, I talked about the first 5 picks, and I didn't predict any trades because I wanted to try to keep it in tune to what the positions are. Now, obviously, trades can happen on draft night. Like the Mikal Bridges trade happened literally just today, where he got traded for 6 picks. So literally anything can happen. But I do want to just briefly talk about that for a second. So I'm gonna, with the first pick of the draft, I have the Atlanta Hawks getting Alexander Sarr, and I know a lot of the drafts have the Hawks getting Zachary Ricochet, but I think it's going to be Sarr for the sole fact that looking at the Hawks roster, I know Onyeka Okongwu is undersized, but he's probably the future at the 5 post Clint Capella, and I know DeAndre Hunter gets injured. He hasn't played 60 games. And then Sadiq Bey just came off an injury, so getting the wing makes a lot of sense. But I think with Trae Young playing the 1, DeJounte Murray at the 2, and Bogdanovic at the 3, I think the 4 is probably going to be the best roundabout position to take, and I really don't see them trading out of pick 1, even though they definitely could, but I don't see them doing it. And then with pick number 2, the Wizards, I have them getting Donovan Clingham. I think they traded Daniel Gafford. They do need a 5. You got Kuzma playing the 4, and I know they have talked about shopping him for a while, but I don't know if they're going to get a deal done this offseason. So I'm going to predict they take a 5 on Wednesday. And Kuzma will still stay the 4. Koulibaly will play the 3. You got Denny Advia. You got Jordan Poole. A guard could make sense. I could see them going like the Reed Shepherd route. But I'm gonna stick with my Donovan Clingham gut feeling and say that I think he goes number 2. So I got Sarr, I got Clingham, and then 3, the Rockets. That's like the best trade out of pick candidate for me in the top 5. But assuming if they didn't, if Sarr went 1 and if Clingham somehow did go 2, assuming that everything I said did happen, I would have Zachary Ricochet going pick 3 because they paid Fred VanVleet. He'd be the 1. Jalen Green would be the 2. You got Sengun at the 5, who's is coming off an injury. At the 4, you could play Tari Eason, and at the 3, replacing Dillon Brooks is not a terrible idea. Or you play Amen Thompson at the 3, or he's a bench 2. You could go a lot of different routes with that, and I think if you take Zachary Ricochet, you get a guy who is a quality defender and another good kind of get to the basket, improving shooter, build around guy. With pick 3, that's what you're doing. You want what's best for your team, and considering who would be available at that point, that's the route I would see them going. And then considering the San Antonio Spurs, assuming that those were the first 3 picks, I would think they would take Reed Shepherd. I understand getting a good playmaker for the Spurs is very important, considering the fact that they let Jeremy Sohan take over a lot of those roles. But at the same time, I think they can kind of be okay with that once in a while. And yes, I do think they will get a playmaker, but I don't think it will be at 4. I think that's something they'll look towards with pick 8 or address in free agency. There's a lot of good veteran guards who could go to San Antonio. There's Dennis Schroeder. There's multiple other guys who will be free agents who, like Monte Morris, guys who could fit that type of role, what they need at the 1. And I think, yes, they have Devin Vassell. Yes, they have Keldon Johnson, but the main approach is to build around Victor for the future. And with Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell, you don't necessarily need Reed Shepherd. But if you were to go, quote-unquote, best player available in that moment, I think getting one of the best shooters in the draft is going to be very helpful for a team that sometimes struggle to score outside of their best players. And then moving on to pick 4, that leaves me with the Pistons. I do think they take Montez Buzelis. That seems to be a very commonly mocked thing that I've seen but I also think that that makes sense schematically. Not many coaches are moving Cade across from the 1, 2, and 3. They're kind of just playing him at the 1 and 2. You got Jaden Ivey. You got Jalen Duren. You got Beef Stew. Go get yourself Montez Buzelis. Go get yourself that wing guy who can replace from the Bojan Bojanovic trade that they made with the Knicks a while back ago. And that's going to essentially, that's my top 5 picks. And because I made a little YouTube short, I didn't really get a chance to actually explain any of it because it's only 15 seconds. So I wanted to do that quick little rant and talk about it. And yes, I have this little South Park background. But anyways, we're back to South Park. We beat Professor Chaos, which is Butters, to anyone who's a big South Park fan. And we're about to continue the story. And also, this game's going to get very interesting because once we talk to Butters, we're going to get